picture this, it's late at night, and the world around you is quiet. The noise of the day has faded, the distractions are gone, and all that remains is you and her. She's sitting there, just like she always has. Her face is familiar. Her presence is familiar. Nothing on the surface has changed. And yet, deep inside your chest, there's a feeling you can't ignore. Something is different. Something is missing. You try to find it in her eyes, but the warmth that once lived there has grown distant. She still looks at you, but she doesn't see you the same way anymore. And in that moment, without words, without explanation, your nervous system begins to understand a truth your heart isn't ready to accept. There was a time when everything felt effortless, when her attention gravitated towards you naturally, when her voice carried emotional weight, when her laughter felt alive, when her presence alone was enough to make you feel certain, grounded, chosen. You didn't question it. You didn't analyze it, because it was real, it was alive, it was mutual. But emotional connection is not a fixed structure. It's a living psychological state, sustained by emotional energy, by curiosity, by the subtle tension that keeps two nervous systems engaged with each other. And when that energy begins to fade, it doesn't disappear all at once. It fades quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. At first, the changes are small, so small that you convince yourself they don't matter. She responds a little slower. Her voice feels slightly colder. Her attention drifts more easily. She seems present, but not invested. You tell yourself she's tired. You tell yourself she's stressed. You tell yourself everything is fine. But deep down, there's a quiet voice inside you that knows the truth. Because human intuition evolved for survival. Your brain is constantly scanning for emotional shifts, for subtle changes in attachment and connection. And when emotional detachment begins, your nervous system feels it long before your mind understands it. What makes emotional detachment so painful is not the moment it happens, it's the moment you realize it already happened. Because detachment doesn't come with closure. It doesn't give you a clear line where everything changed. It's a slow rewiring of emotional dependency. Her brain, without her even consciously realizing it, begins reducing its reliance on you. The dopamine that once activated in your presence begins activating less. The emotional anticipation F dopamine that once aids. The subconscious sense of emotional need weakens. And once the brain adapts to emotional independence, attachment loses its foundation. Not because you became worthless, not because you failed, but because emotional systems adapt to what feels stable, predictable, and no longer essential for emotional survival. And the most difficult truth to accept is this. By the time you feel her emotional distance, she has already been living with it. She has already processed it in silence. She has already rehearsed life without needing you in the same way. While you were still emotionally standing in the relationship, her mind was slowly stepping outside of it. Not out of cruelty, not out of betrayal, but out of psychological adaptation. The human brain protects itself from uncertainty by creating emotional independence. And once that independence forms, attachment begins to dissolve. In that moment, you may feel powerless. You may feel confused. You may search for something you did wrong. You may replay every memory, every conversation, trying to find the exact moment everything changed. But emotional detachment rarely has a single cause. It's not one mistake. It's not one argument. It's a gradual shift in emotional polarity, in perceived psychological reliance, in the invisible dynamics that govern human connection. And when those dynamics change, the emotional structure changes with them. But listen carefully, because this part matters most. Her emotional detachment is not the end of your story. It is the moment your awareness begins. Because when you stop depending on external emotional validation for your sense of identity, you reclaim something far more powerful. You reclaim emotional sovereignty, the ability to stand within yourself, grounded and stable, regardless of who stays or who leaves. Because true strength was never about controlling someone else's attachment. It was about mastering your own emotional foundation. So if you ever find yourself sitting in that silence, feeling the emotional distance of someone who once felt close, don't panic. Don't beg. Don't chase what is already withdrawing. Instead, observe, understand, accept. Because emotional detachment, as painful as it feels, is not destruction. It is revelation. It reveals where you placed your emotional dependence. It reveals where you forgot your own center. And most importantly, it reveals the beginning of your return to yourself. It's late at night. The room is Q. It's late at night. The room is quiet. She's sitting across from you, scrolling through her phone, responding when you speak, nodding when you explain something. On the surface, nothing is wrong. No shouting, no dramatic arguments, no slammed doors. But something inside you feels unsettled. You can't explain it logically. There's no clear evidence. Yet your instincts are whispering a truth your mind doesn't want to accept. The warmth is different. The energy is different. The invisible current that once pulled her toward you now feels neutral, flat, almost cold. And what makes it more terrifying is that she hasn't left. She's still there. But emotionally, she's already somewhere else. Emotional detachment doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send warnings. It doesn't ask for permission. It moves quietly through subtle changes, changes so small you ignore them at first. She laughs, but the laughter doesn't reach her eyes. She listens, but she doesn't lean in anymore. She touches you, but the touch feels habitual instead of hungry. What you're witnessing is not mood, it's neurological recalibration. Attraction and attachment are chemical processes. Dopamine spikes when anticipation exists. Oxytocin rises when bonding feels secure and emotionally stimulating. But when emotional intensity fades, when predictability replaces mystery, when perceived strength feels ordinary, the brain adapts. It lowers its emotional investment. It protects itself by slowly reducing reliance. And once the mind learns how to exist without emotional dependence on you, the relationship begins dissolving from the inside out. The most painful part, brother, is that by the time you sense her emotional withdrawal, she has already processed it internally. Women often grieve a relationship before it officially ends. They detach in layers, first mentally, then emotionally, then physically. So when the final conversation happens, when she says she needs space or doesn't feel the same anymore, her voice sounds calm, controlled, almost peaceful. And you stand there shocked because for you the breakup just started. For her, it ended months ago. She already fought the internal battle. She already negotiated with her own emotions. She already accepted the loss before you even realized there was one. Understand this clearly. Emotional detachment is not always triggered by betrayal or hatred. Sometimes it's triggered by stagnation. Sometimes it's triggered by subtle neediness. Sometimes it's triggered by the quiet shift in dynamic when a man's emotional center becomes too dependent on one person. Human psychology responds to perceived value and emotional polarity. When tension disappears completely, when everything becomes safe, predictable, and static, the brain stops releasing the chemicals that create desire. Stability builds comfort, yes, but attraction feeds on growth, challenge, and emotional aliveness. Without movement, the system goes neutral. And neutral is the beginning of detachment. There are warning signs most men ignore. She stops arguing passionately. She becomes agreeable instead of reactive. She stops asking where you are, not because she trusts you more, but because she cares less. Her curiosity fades. Her emotional intensity lowers. Silence replaces fire. And silence, my friend, is more dangerous than anger. Anger means there's still emotional investment. Indifference means the investment is being withdrawn. When she no longer needs reassurance, no longer seeks validation from you, no longer feels urgency to fix things, that's when the emotional shift has already happened. And the tragedy is that many men mistake calmness for stability, when in reality, it's emotional preparation for exit. But here is the truth most people avoid. Her detachment does not define your worth. It reveals your attachment. It reveals where your emotional strength was outsourced. When a man builds his identity around being needed, being chosen, being validated, emotional withdrawal feels like destruction. It feels like loss of identity. But a grounded man understands something different. He understands that love is shared, not owned. He understands that attachment is fluid. He understands that his value is internal, not negotiated through someone else's feelings. Emotional independence is not coldness. It is stability within yourself. If she detaches, let her. Not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with clarity. You cannot force brain chemistry. You cannot negotiate attraction. You cannot argue someone back into emotional investment. The only power you ever truly had was your growth, your self-control, your direction. When you continue evolving physically, mentally, financially, spiritually, you maintain your internal gravity, and gravity does not chase, it pulls. A man who stands firm in his purpose does not collapse when someone withdraws. He recalibrates, he reflects, he strengthens. So if you ever find yourself in that quiet moment, sitting across from her, sensing something has changed, don't panic, observe, accept what your intuition already knows. Emotional detachment is not sudden. It is the final stage of a process that began long ago. And while it may feel like an ending, sometimes it is an awakening. Because when illusion dies, clarity is born. And clarity, brother, is the beginning of becoming unshakable. If you want, I can now make it even deeper, darker, and more intense. Almost cinematic monologue style with cues and dramatic pacing. So if you're watching this and you felt that silence, that emotional distance you couldn't explain, I want you to understand something, brother. You didn't lose yourself because someone detached from you. You only lost the illusion that your strength came from being needed. Because the truth is, your value was never defined by someone's ability to stay. It was defined by your ability to stand, even when they walked away. Emotional detachment does not break a strong man. It reveals him. It forces him to face the one person he was avoiding, himself. And in that confrontation, something powerful happens. The need for validation begins to die. The fear of abandonment begins to weaken. And in its place, something unshakable is born: emotional independence. Understand this deeply. The right connection will never require you to abandon your strength to maintain it. Real attachment does not demand that you shrink yourself, chase endlessly, or sacrifice your identity. Because the strongest position you will ever have in life is not being chosen, it is choosing yourself first. When you stop chasing emotional certainty from others, you become emotionally dangerous in the best way possible. Calm, grounded, untouchable. Not because you stop feeling, but because you stop depending. So let this pain refine you, not define you. Let it teach you discipline. Let it teach you emotional control. Let it remind you that your purpose is bigger than any single person's presence. Because one day, you will look back at this moment, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You will realize that their detachment did not destroy you. It awakened you. And the man who rises from that awakening is not the same man who once feared being left. He is stronger. He is calmer. He is free. And remember this: the moment you stop fearing loss is the moment you become impossible to lose.